Hello, Sam here again, and believe it or not, but we are more than halfway through the course already, so it's flying by. But what I want to do in this video is just give some of my thoughts about the Unit 2, where we're making and modifying curriculum, and then I'll give a quick preview at the end about the unit that's already underway this week. So Unit 2 was about making and modifying curriculum. Obviously, we can only go so far in 1 week on this topic. We chose to focus that week on backward design as one approach to building curriculum. One key idea about backward design is that you start with the end goals when you plan your curriculum rather than starting with the activities or the textbook that you will use with your students. But another key distinction between backward design and traditional curriculum design is that backward design focuses on student understanding rather than procedural skill as the end goal. This focus on understanding mathematics rather than just being able to compute answers successfully is made clear by the title of the McTee and Wiggins book, Understanding by Design. With regard to modifying curriculum, you had some great discussions on Canvas about the different reasons you modify or supplement your curriculum materials and the way that you do so. In nearly all the instances of modifying the curriculum, you were doing so because of some kind of attention to your students' needs. For example, some of you wanted to modify or supplement your curriculum or textbook to increase engagement or the challenge that your students felt. So you noted things like the textbook or the curriculum materials were boring or dry, and so you wanted to supplement things to increase student engagement. You tried to find things that asked more from your students because the textbook itself was not asking enough. You tried to find things that fit the students' needs or that differentiated to the particular students' needs that you had. And maybe the textbook you were using, some of you said, lacked real-world connections, and so you supplemented with things that maybe brought in more real-world connections or applications. Some of you also talked about supplementing to increase the opportunities for skill practice. So you said things like the test needs more skills than what the textbook requires, so you supplemented things to try to give more skill practice. Or the textbook didn't have very many straight up drill problems, and so you brought in some more drill problems. So it's interesting to think about the reasons that people supplemented like that, and overall you might talk about it as, or we might reflect on this as a way to balance procedural skill development with application problems, engaging, challenging problems, and finding that right balance. And maybe the textbook itself doesn't have the balance that you desire, and so you supplement to try to bring things more into balance. In terms of how you found your supplements, a lot of you talked about going online, looking at teacher blogs or math websites. People mentioned Teachers Pay Teachers and other teaching communities that are online. There also is the traditional face-to-face or non-technological way of finding resources or supplementing resources. So a lot of you talked about your colleagues and sharing things with each other. You could share in this class, but also sharing with colleagues in your building or other people that are teaching the same subject as you. But a lot of the supplementary materials were definitely coming from online sources, and so we just wanted to encourage everyone to use multiple criteria to evaluate those online materials critically. Don't just look for something that fits the right content goal, or hey, it's on the topic that I was looking for, and then use it. Bring a critical eye to that and think about what it's engaging the students in, what kind of thinking it's promoting, whether it's promoting rich mathematical activity and discourse. So using some of those criteria that we had from the Tar et al. Article last week, you can apply those to really critically evaluate online materials. There are a lot of bad materials out there, and so you don't want to just grab something that happens to fit, which I know you're not doing, but you can be busy. There can be so much stuff to sift through that sometimes you're just happy to find something that addresses the right standard. And we can all just push ourselves a little bit further to try to bring a critical eye to what it is that you're using as supplements. And because we are all regularly looking for and finding these supplementary materials to use with our students, we should actually start thinking of that as part of the identity of being a teacher. Being a teacher is not just how you enact something with students, or it's not just how you interact with students in the classroom. Being a teacher, and one of the skills of being a good teacher, is actually being able to find high quality resources and being able to know where to find them, know them when you see them, and then be able to implement them in the classroom. But that's a good skill to have, and a skill that can be developed is to be a good searcher and a good finder and a good evaluator of online resources. If you don't want to spend so much time sifting through all the online resources that are out there, much of which is pretty bad and procedural or not connected to the specific interests of your students, then you might choose instead of being a good searcher and sifter, you might instead decide to be a really good modifier of curriculum materials. So modifying what you do have and making it a little bit better than it is. So a good modifier of curriculum materials would find ways to ask questions and push students' thinking beyond just examples and rote exercises. They might find places for good mathematical discussions, or adjust a lesson so that it becomes about an investigation and a conjecture rather than just about a straightforward lecture on a topic. So those are two parts of a teacher identity, and you can kind of choose which one you want to develop the most robustly, to be a good searcher for resources or to be a good modifier of the textbook or the resources that you already have. Now, moving on, there was a lot of lively discussion. I really enjoyed reading it. I hope you had a good time interacting with each other about this on the topic of teachers finding and creating a lot of their own curriculum materials. It's really kind of a new era where we've moved in a lot of ways beyond just using the textbook, and now a lot of the teacher's job is to sort of disregard parts of the textbook or the textbook entirely, or some districts don't even have textbooks. And so the teacher is really finding materials to use, sharing things, and that whole, phenomenon that's going on now. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? A lot of great ideas were shared, and it's a really pretty complicated issue where you can really see both sides. Some people said, well, whether it's good or bad, it's very understandable that teachers are more and more finding their own stuff, using their own materials, because maybe they don't have full faith in the district choices for textbooks. Maybe they don't have faith in the textbooks that are being produced by publishers in the United States. We do know that in the U.S., more so than other countries, we have a lot of pretty clear flaws in our textbooks, at least the ones that are kind of dominant in the marketplace. But also school districts, they're maybe making choices because of budgetary reasons rather than like the best possible materials. So if teachers don't have faith in those textbook choices, then they're going to take it upon themselves to try to find something better. But people talked about how when the teachers do take that upon themselves, it could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing depending on what the teachers find. If they go find some drill and kill worksheets or some just poorly aligned sorts of materials, that's going to be a bad thing. But if teachers can find some stuff that's really a step up and some good learning opportunities for students and coherent, then that would be a good thing. Some people did talk about in some more detail about the dangers of teachers having to find their own materials. So it's not necessarily bad, but there are some risks involved. For example, teachers who find their own materials might lose some fairness for students between different classes. Like if I'm finding some materials and other teachers are finding other materials, we might not be on the same page. We might not be giving the same kinds of learning opportunities to students, which means some students who happen to be in Mr. Jones's class, they get a certain kind of curriculum, and then students who happen to be scheduled in Miss Williams' class, they might get a different whole curriculum, different kinds of learning experiences. So that's not really fair to the students. There also could be a loss of coherence across the grades. Like if a teacher makes a decision about what they're going to do, what they're going to put in the curriculum, and they think it's fine, but then the next year they've maybe missed something that was going to be important next year. Whereas with a textbook series, hopefully they have at least planned for that stuff, things that are going to be needed in the subsequent years. Now, there's some risk involved, but it does make a lot of sense for teachers to do this because teachers can be more adaptive with the times. Some of you talked about this in the discussion forum, that textbooks, especially printed textbooks, are pretty slow to respond to modern times, things that are going on, just keeping up to date even with what we know about learning. So teachers can be more adaptive. They can stay really on top of current events and things like that. They can also tailor things to their students a little bit more. Another thing that makes sense about teachers finding their own materials is just teacher agency. Like teachers, they know what's needed. They know their students, so it makes a lot of sense for them to have the power to select the stuff that's going to work the best. But to do that takes a lot of energy and expertise and time. It's not a trivial thing, so that is an extra burden on the teachers. So in an ideal situation, this burden would not have to be placed on teachers because there would be good textbooks in place that are responsive, can meet the needs of the students, and so teachers don't have to worry about finding stuff because what they have is actually really good. That would be an ideal world. So really what we're talking about is in an ideal world, there would just be better textbooks. Everybody would have good textbooks, good materials in their hands, and then they wouldn't have to go search and replace. Now looking ahead to Unit 3, which is going on this week, it deals with standards and assessment, which are the king and queen of curriculum, I would say. So in Unit 3, you'll read an essay by Bob Rees, who's an emeritus professor right here from Mizzou, and then there will also be a discussion forum on that reading. There's also a discussion forum about how you use assessment data in your teaching or at your school. And then there are 2 assignments for Unit 3. There's an assignment that involves analyzing some official standards that you get to choose, and then there's an assignment analyzing some standardized assessment items. The details on those assignments are posted in the assignment page on Canvas, and those are both due by the end of the day Sunday. Let us know if you have any questions on them.